What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 23 preview, so I'm going to go through a bunch of your questions, starting off with the Bruno Fernandes hokey cokey. So, is it actually worth going from Bruno back to Mahrez or De Bruyne for the double? City have an extra fixture, but Bruno is a 90-minute man with penalties. With Liverpool's double, Bruno to Salah looks like an easy move. So this has become a little bit more complicated because Fernandes is pretty much now the number one penalty taker. That's what it looks like anyway, and obviously Liverpool have that double. If you're going to do Fernandes to Salah, presumably you're going to wait until game week 25. So in the meantime, is it worth one transfer, which you could value at 4 points, to get De Bruyne or Mahrez in instead? Now, the short answer is, I think I would probably do it, but I'm not 100% confident about the move. And if you're not either, and you want to keep Fernandes, I think that's perfectly okay. And that's not just sitting on the fence. I just do think it's quite close. But I think ultimately I would want to buy that upside of having the extra fixture. But this is how I would look at it. So Man City's fixtures are Villa at home, Arsenal away, and Nottingham Forest away. Now, the extra fixture that was put into Game Week 23 was the Arsenal away game. So if we just look at the other two for a second, you've got Villa at home and Nottingham Forest away. Two pretty good fixtures, I would say, for Man City. And for Man United, or for Fernandes, it's Leeds away and Leicester at home. I would say as a combination of fixtures, they are just as good as what Man City have outside of the extra additional fixture for Arsenal away. And as was pointed out in the question, Fernandes basically gets 90 minutes every single game that he starts. The only time it hasn't happened is game week 1, where he got to 89 minutes. So we won't worry too much about that. So you could look at it that you're spending 4 points to get De Bruyne or Mahrez, who might not play 90 minutes, just to get Arsenal away, which could be quite a tricky fixture, and neither of them have penalties either. If Haaland wasn't on the pitch and Mahrez was, he would be the next choice to take a penalty, but obviously that's quite unlikely. The problem with trying to predict penalties is it's impossible, okay? Sometimes players can go 20, 25, 30 games and not get one, and sometimes you get like 2 or 3 in quick succession, which could happen to Fernandes. And if that does happen, you suddenly look stupid for selling him for what would be an extra transfer. But I just, because you can't predict it, I don't think I would worry about it massively. And with De Bruyne's minutes, they are generally pretty good. I think over the last 3 game weeks, tactically, he's been benched for the Spurs home game and the Spurs away game, which is why he only played 31 minutes. He only played 76 against Wolves, but obviously they were pretty comfortable in that game. And before that, he played 90 minutes a lot. I guess the one concern is Man City are going for a bit of a, for them at least, a bit of a rough patch where they've lost to Man United. Yes, they beat Spurs, but Pep wasn't happy with the performance. They comfortably beat Wolves, but then they've lost to Spurs away. So will Pep start overthinking things and changing things around again? Who knows? But ultimately, I think that it's a good bet to go for De Bruyne in between because his minutes are usually pretty good. And he does have that extra fixture, even if it's Arsenal away. And it comes back to that upside where I think I would be comfortable spending one extra transfer to have De Bruyne with one more fixture than Fernandes. But like I said, it is pretty close. With Mahrez, it's a little bit tougher. Obviously, his price is nice at 7.7, but that doesn't really come into the conversation because if you're thinking about going to Salah later anyway, you're going to spend that money eventually. His minutes have been pretty good recently, but against Chelsea he only played 30, against Spurs he only played 58. So if we say he's going to play 60 to 70 minutes over all of the next 3 fixtures, that's 180 to 210 minutes, which isn't really that much difference to what Fernandes is going to get, apart from you can guarantee that, and he's got penalties as well. So I would be a little bit less sure about going for Mahrez because of minutes, although when they're on the pitch together, De Bruyne and Mahrez, the difference in points probably isn't that much. So it really is a difficult one. I think if I was in this position, I think I would probably do it because I would just like to have that extra double game week player. I would also say because of the double game week announcement, a lot of people are just not going to go for triple Man City. And for some teams, that's going to be perfectly viable. But that would almost make me want to take that risk on the upside even more, because if people are going to go into this week with Haaland and one defender or Haaland and one attacker, and you can triple up instead, there could be a big advantage if they do end up scoring huge points. And let's not forget, Arsenal away is tough, but Man City can score in that game. And if they do, there's every chance that De Bruyne is involved, or Mahrez. And if that happens, hopefully they've also got a big score against Villa at home, which I think is a good fixture. So I would do it. It's pretty close. If you're not comfortable, I think it's perfectly fine to just wait until 25 to remove Fernandes and then get Salah in them. All right, let's move on to Liverpool. So how important is it for us to be bringing in Liverpool players for their double game week? With lots of midfield options, is Darwin the best player to go for? So in terms of the best player or how many, that's very team dependent, and I'll come back onto that in a second. Let's talk about the importance first of all. I don't think you need to be massively worried about getting lots of Liverpool players in right now. One, because of the way the fixtures are, and two, because Arsenal also have a double game week in game week 25, and most people, when there is a double, they want to captain a double game week player. Well, now you can go for Nketiah or Odegaard or Saka or whoever you want from Arsenal without having to worry about getting in a Liverpool player that you might not want, right? And if we look at the fixtures, I actually think, look, Everton at home this week, yes, they played well against Arsenal, and yes, Liverpool haven't been in great form recently. That can change very quickly. I still think on paper that's a pretty good fixture, but you don't need to worry about getting the Liverpool players in right now, because then they come to Newcastle away, which is much tougher. And ultimately, you're not captaining a Liverpool player in 23 or 24. They haven't got a double this week, and you're going to mostly go for Haaland in game week 24. So you don't really need them, if you want one, until game week 25. Then they have Man United at home and Bournemouth away, but they might not play in game week 28. Now, Fulham and Sunderland play in the FA Cup 4th round replay tonight on Wednesday. If Sunderland win that game, then Liverpool versus Fulham will be on in game week 28, and that completely changes the conversation, because then you're looking at it as a double, Bournemouth, Fulham in a game where other teams will blank, and they will play in game week 32 as well, because Liverpool and Forest are both out of the FA Cup. And if you end up free hitting in game week 29, carrying a Liverpool player all this way might not be as bad as it currently sounds. Now, we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves there, because Fulham might beat Sunderland. If that happens, the game in 28 might still be on, but we won't find out until just before game week 26, in which case it's probably not worth using a load of transfers to triple up on Liverpool if you're currently on 0, when they might not play in game week 28, and then you've got to deal with that. The way the fixtures end up falling in 28 for the blanks and 32, based on the FA Cup results that we'll get before game week 26, it may work out that game week 28 is worth a free hit, but we're not going to know that right now, which is part of the problem. So that is why I don't think you need to massively worry about Liverpool players right this second, okay? All I would say is just keep an open mind, right? I know all the comments right now, all of the comments are about Salah, even if I don't mention them, they're about Salah, or, you know, how bad Liverpool are and how we don't need their players. All it will take is a couple of goals from one of their players against Everton or Newcastle, and you'll start thinking differently. So I'm not saying you have to bring them in right now. Just keep an open mind that that might change very quickly, right? So then we come on to the other part of the conversation, who are the best players to go for? And I talked about how it's team dependent. So we're going to go back to the FPL page. If you look at my team, I've already got Salah. Some of you might have Darwin, you might have Trent, some of you might also have Salah. If that's the case, you should absolutely keep them. And anyone that tells you otherwise, I would probably ignore. I get that they've been poor recently and the points have been really bad, but there's no point in using a transfer on Salah to take him out before Everton at home and a double game week where he may also play in game week 28 as well. It's just not worth it, because what are the other options? You move to Fernandes, but he blanks in 25. You move to De Bruyne, but Salah is better in 25 as well. So then you've got to reverse that. Or you go to Harry Kane. Now, to be honest, I was possibly going to look at that before the double was announced, but using 2 transfers to move off a player with a double in 2 game weeks' time just doesn't sound that great. So I think if you've got Darwin, Salah, Trent, or maybe a different Liverpool player like Robertson, maybe some of you got Alisson for some reason, then you just keep them, okay? Then you've got the other team structure where maybe you've got a Fernandes or a De Bruyne. Well, again, that seems like a pretty easy swap to get to Salah. Like, Fernandes literally doesn't play in game week 25. So when we're saying, you know, there's lots of midfield options, yeah, there are right now. Rashford, Fernandes, Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard, Mitoma are players that people have got in their team. But when we get to game week 25, Fernandes doesn't play. Then he's got Liverpool away, which I don't think you can say is any better than Man United at home. And Southampton at home is pretty good, but Liverpool play Bournemouth away. And then in game week 28, Man United are almost certainly going to blank. And I get it, right? Man United playing very well right now, Liverpool not, but that can change quite quickly. So I think the idea of holding Fernandes is just not something I've even given any consideration to. So again, thinking about my team structure, I've already got Salah. There's no point in selling him. I've got Fernandes. Well, he's not going to play. That's an easy switch with 2 transfers to get to Darwin up front. So me having 2 Liverpool players sounds absolutely crazy right now, but it kind of fits with the way my team is set up. Let's say you're not on that, right, and you don't have Salah already, and instead you've got Harry Kane, which, you know, a lot of people have been doing really well with so far. Let's just say that extra player is, I'm just going to put March in, but it could be Matoma. You could be set up like this, with 2 free transfers. Is it worth going from Kane to Salah right now? Absolutely not. Is it worth doing it in the double? Maybe, right? If that game in 28 is on, then I would say it's almost certainly worth doing because Salah's got the extra fixture in 25 and 28. If they don't play against Fulham, you might just hold Harry Kane all the way through and then decide later because Kane's been brilliant, and that is perfectly fine. So when people say Liverpool players are just not worth it whatsoever, most people don't think about how other people's teams look. So I would just try and ignore that where you can and just base it on your team only. And if you're in a position where you've got De Bruyne or Fernandes, that seems like a very easy switch to get to Salah. Even if they've been playing badly, you got potential upside there. And again, it comes down to the previous question where I spoke about the fact that a lot of people aren't going to go for triple Man City. All this talk about people not wanting Liverpool, that would just make me want them even slightly more, right? Because if people are going to ignore them, there's potential upside there. And let's bear in mind, in the past, we've bought Watford players in for double game weeks and even captained them when other people haven't wanted to. And it hasn't always worked out, but if it does, then suddenly you're actually up on points, right? So, I like I said, I would just keep an open mind. You don't have to rush to get 2 or 3 Liverpool players in right now, but just leave your options open later on. I think Darwin, Salah are probably going to be the best options. I guess the one thing to kind of quickly mention is the fixtures. They got Everton, Newcastle, 23-24. Then they play Champions League. Then it's the double before Man United. Players like Salah's minutes are pretty good, so you don't really have to worry about that. I guess there could be some rotation for the likes of Robertson, where Tsimikas could play, Trent, where Milner could play, even Darwin Nunez. If Jota is back by then, they could play Gakpo, Jota, Salah, and Darwin Nunez could get a rest. So it's not necessarily ideal, but I don't think Klopp really has the luxury of, you know, rotating players too much right now, although he may well just want to concentrate on playing Champions League instead. But I think because the double falls afterwards and they've got Man United and Bournemouth before they play their second leg, I don't think we'll see a huge amount of rotation. It's just something worth looking at. And obviously they are conceding a lot of goals right now, so I think Darwin instead of Trent would probably be my preference. Anyway, that's Liverpool. Let me know in the I don't even need to say let me know what you're gonna what you think, because you're gonna do that anyway. So is it really worth buying into the game week 25 doubles excluding Arsenal? The fixtures aren't crazy good and the teams haven't been performing that well. So it's not necessarily about going all in on a double game week. It's about taking that additional information that you now have, which that 4 teams are going to double in 25, and applying that to any transfers that you make. And it's okay to change your mind about which transfers you want to do since the announcement. So going back to that Salah example, no one really was looking at doing Fernandes or De Bruyne to Salah in game week 25. But now when you look at it again, Fernandes blanks, De Bruyne only has 1 fixture, Salah has 2. Does that transfer make more sense now than it did before? Yes, you might still not want to do it, and that is fine, but it does make more sense. Likewise, you're probably not going to want to triple up on Wolves or Everton players. In fact, I would probably advise against that, but it might now be that one of their players is a better transfer in for you than it was before. And I think the best way I can show that is to use an example with my own team, okay? So I've got Edison, which, as you well know, has not been a great transfer, but he's got a double game week this week, so I'm not going to take him out. Let's say after this week, in game week 24, I want to remove him and I want to go a little bit cheaper to get some funds out of there. Now, the obvious choice is to go for Kepa, and he may well be the best choice, right? I'm currently not planning on selling Edison, so I'd have to have more of a think about it. But Kepa might be the best choice. But now we also know that Everton have a double game week, right? And also a guaranteed fixture in 28. So I might look at Jordan Pickford for 4.4 million, which sounds crazy, I get it. But they've got Leeds at home in 24, which isn't bad. Then they've got a double game week. And of course, Arsenal away is tricky. But save points possibly, maybe a clean sheet against Villa, who knows. Forest away is okay, Brentford at home's alright. Chelsea away is not great. I would much rather have Kepa that week, and I would have to take that into account. And then after that, it's quite tricky. So whether or not I would want Pickford for the long term, who knows. Maybe I keep Edison, and maybe I get Pickford in instead of Ward for an extra 0.4 million. I get a goalkeeper with slightly better fixtures and that double in game week 25. Maybe that is now the way to go. Maybe I don't pick Pickford whatsoever, but I at least take into account that I now know he's got an extra fixture. Another example, right? I am heavily considering doing Martinelli to Odegaard this week. Now, as you can see, I don't have enough money to make this move. I've got to make up 0.4 million. Now, the way I was looking at doing that was to take Luke Shaw out for a 4.8 million defender. And previously, I was looking at maybe carrying through a Brighton player because they will probably double in 26 or 27. And again, I may well end up making that move and going for Estepinian. But now I also need to take into account that Everton have a double. And obviously, Man United aren't going to play in 25. So Tarkowski, for just 4.2 million, maybe he's the best option, which also leaves me with 0.6 million to make another move down the line. Maybe that's my Ward to Pickford money in game week 24. I don't know if I want double Everton defence, but again, it's just another example. And in a game week 25, where keep in mind, there's 4 teams that are going to blank, so Trippier, for example, is not even going to play. If I can play a 4.2 million player for Villa at home and Arsenal away, and then bench them for most weeks, knowing that they're nailed on and I can call upon them when needed, that seems okay. So to come back to the question, is it really worth buying in? I mean, no, I'm not advising tripling up on Liverpool, Arsenal, Wolves and Everton, but you should definitely take it into account when you make your transfers. So is a wildcard viable if you constantly need to take -8s to cover the blank? So these questions are difficult to answer on a team-specific basis because I don't have everyone's teams in front of me. I don't think most people need as many -8s as they think they do, but you know your team better than me, so maybe you do. All I can answer is whether or not a wildcard is viable. What I would say is, it's more viable now because of the double game week announcement for 25, but I still don't think it's a good move. The reason I say it's more viable is you already know Man United are going to blank, and so by game week 25, most of us are probably going to have to get rid of 2 or even all 3 of our Man United players. So you could do that all in one go on a wild card. You could preempt the double by getting a couple of Liverpool players in instead. Wolves and Everton players, yes, you don't want to play them every single week, but they do have some nice single game weeks in and around that double in 25. And obviously they do double in 25 as well, but it all feels a little bit risky to put all your faith in the wild card right now, especially getting rid of all those Man United players for Liverpool players, given how both teams are playing. So I'd rather delay that and take a couple of extra hits if I needed to later on. The other problem, if we come back to the FPL page, so like with Wolves, for example, if you got their players in to maybe play them a couple of times over game weeks 23, 24, 25, that's all well and good, but the fixtures in 26 and 27 aren't great, and this fixture in 28 is not guaranteed to be on. So while some of us used an early wild card last year for game week 26, where we got in a lot of players that were doubling and also playing in the blank, that's much harder to do this time around. So it does become more viable, but I don't think it's a good move. And also, we don't know how blank 28 is going to look yet until game week 26, and we also don't know what the double game weeks are going to look like in 29. So blowing your wild card now and not being able to manage this kind of period later on could get very, very tricky. So I would go back and look at your team and see whether you actually need that many -8s, because you probably don't, right? If you plan it, I'm not even saying plan it correctly, but just have another look, I would say. And for most people, you're going to find it much more beneficial to hold that wild card until later. So it is more viable, but I still don't think it's a great move. So it's quite funny, because of the double game week 25 announcement yesterday, we actually haven't talked a huge amount about double game week 23 in this video, but I will have team selection tomorrow, and I'm one of those people that's in a position of maybe changing the likes of Martinelli or Ben White, and I'll have final thoughts on Friday. So for anything I've missed, I'll try and cover it in those videos. But this question is about game week 23. So could you order the Man City players in order of who's best for the double game week, excluding Haaland? Who would be your top 3? Are any of these players worth taking a hit for, given the risk of rotation? So the order I've put the pictures in, from left to right, so De Bruyne down to Rico Lewis, is an order of who I think is best. So De Bruyne, I think, is the best option for game week 23. It is worth saying, this is in isolation just for the double. It's not necessarily about who I think think are the best options to bring in. So for example, I would rather have Grealish than any of the defenders for game week 23 because he's getting a decent amount of minutes right now, but I would not be convinced about him getting minutes long term once Foden is back and stuff like that. And I know he's been out of favour, but that could change pretty quickly. And likewise, I think specifically for the double, to guarantee the minutes, Edison is better than all those other players to his right, but I wouldn't be using a transfer to bring him in. So just take that context into account when I'm talking about this. So with De Bruyne and Mahrez, I've already spoken about them with the Bruno Fernandes question at the start. I just think minutes-wise, De Bruyne looks a little bit better than Mahrez for this double specifically. Obviously, he's a lot more money though. So if it's a case of bringing someone in for a hit and then maybe holding them for a few weeks, I would probably go for Mahrez. But I do think with Champions League and stuff coming up like that, I don't know if I would take a huge amount of hits for any of these players. In terms of the defenders, I think in the short term, Akanji is probably the best option while John Stones is out. Although Diaz is back, so he might start taking minutes now. Longer term, it gets a little bit tougher, and Ake might be just as good. We saw him that he's played left back. In the last game, he didn't play left back, but he played left centre back. Who knows? As an Ake owner, I'm a little bit worried that he's going to miss at least one game in the double or at least one game in the next 2 game weeks because there is that kind of threat of rotation. So if I was taking a hit, it would have to be for an attacker and it would be De Bruyne or Mahrez. The only way I would take a hit for a defender if it's to free up a position from another team. So I don't know, let's say you had double Arsenal defence and you wanted to go for double Arsenal attack, so you wanted to get rid of one of your Arsenal defenders for a hit, then yeah, maybe you could get a Man City defender in. I probably would choose a Akanji, but there's not many scenarios where I would do that. And look, Rico Lewis is nice and cheap, so from that point of view, he makes sense. But we could start to see some rotation with him and Walker. I mean, Lewis obviously played left back in the last game, so who knows? He might be more nailed on than I'm giving him credit for. But I think the rough order would be like that. But I think for a lot of teams, if you've now got 2 Man City players and there's other transfers you're worried about, like your Arsenal players, maybe getting Liverpool players in later on, you can probably just stick with 2 Man City. I don't think a triple up is essential, but if you can get to it easily and it doesn't mess your other plans up, like if you've already got Odegaard and Saka or Odegaard and Nketiah, you're not worrying about Martinelli, you could get a third player in. But again, it's very team dependent. So yeah, rough order would be this: De Bruyne, then Mahrez. After that, I'd be a bit conscious about not taking a hit for any of the other players. But let me know in the comments below if you disagree or agree with anything I've said in this video. Give it a like if you enjoy it. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.